I have insurance, and so I don't need to focus on anything else other than just my physical well-being, because a bike is completely replaceable. And the fact that you have insurance and that you're protected and you're covered, all you need to do is focus on yourself and getting yourself better. Like, I'm going to try and I'm going to take risks and I'm going to take chances, because why else? Why would you not, right? I'm Alicia Speak. I'm 37. I'm a full-time lawyer, but I'm also a cyclist for Cycle Team London.
So historically, looking back over the last 4 years, in 2016, Gagne won the inaugural Voxy Award, as it was known then, after wins at the Giro Rosa, the Tour of California, and of course picking up the first ever Women's World Tour title as well. In 2017, it was Annemiek van Vleuten who triumphed after wins at Laka and the World Time Trial Championships. Last year, the award was renamed, and with that, it took on a greater meaning. In December 2017, the cycling world lost one of its great British riders. The wonderful Sharon passed away at just 43 years old after a 14-month battle with cervical cancer. Sharon was an Olympian. She was a national champion on the road, on the mountain bike, and in the time trial as well. She also won the Women's Queen of the Mountains jersey at the Women's Tour and a World Championship Team Time Trial bronze medal too. Sharon was a friend. She was a fellow bike rider in my home county of Gloucestershire, and she was also a colleague, joining the Voxwomen team to do brilliant race previews for us that season. And so last year, with the agreement of her lovely mother, Joy, we are incredibly proud that we renamed the Voxy Award the Voxwomen Sharon Law's Road Rider of the Year. It was all the more fitting as well that last season the winner was Corinne Rivera. Now, Corinne is an astonishing bike rider, the first American to ever win the Tour of Flanders, man or woman. And she was here in London. She's a former teammate of Sharon's as well at United Healthcare. So it was brilliant to hear her speak on this stage here in London last year. Now, this season in women's cycling, I think, has been the best I've certainly experienced yet. We saw Marianne back to her very, very best. We saw the emergence of Dutch sprinting star Lorena Wiebes, and we saw that incredible 100k solo effort from Annemiek van Vleuten to win the world road title, and that near faultless display of time trialing from Chloe Dygert-Owen to win the world time trial title. It's been an incredible season, and one of the most competitive and I think unpredictable yet. So we had a spring and a summer public poll, and from that we produced a final shortlist of 4 riders. They are Marianne, winner of Laka, Tour de Yorkshire, Trofeo Binda, the Ladies Tour of Norway, and of course the UCI Women's World Tour overall winner. Annemiek van Vleuten, world champion, winner of the Giro Rosa, Strade Bianche and Liège-Bastogne-Liège. Kirsten Fields, the sprinting sensation who won Gent-Wevelgem and Dreissiger de Panne. And Christine Majerus, the super domestique who, while working for her team leaders, managed to achieve a career-high world ranking of 9th and won her first ever World Tour race, the Bowls Ladies Tour. Enough from me. Let's take a look at these incredible women in action. we go. Annemiek van Vleuten likes to win solo, doesn't she? Pretty astonishing stuff from all 4 of those riders. Now, the format for the evening, we will award the top 3 trophies for first, second, and third place. And we're then going to have a women's cycling panel discussion up here on stage. Andy McGrath, the Rouleur editor, Hannah Walker, Voxwomen and Team WNT representative, will be up here as well. Orla Chennaoui will also be on stage, plus our mystery guest as well. Before we get on to announcing the top 3, we asked Joy if she had any words, Sharon's mother, and she said, please congratulate all contenders for the award this year, especially the final 3. I wish them and all of next year's pro cyclists safe and happy cycling in what will be an exciting time for those choosing to represent their country at the Olympic Games. Thank you for continuing to keep Sharon's memory alive. So, for the past few weeks, the public have been voting for their winner. And I'm delighted now to reveal the top 3. And third place, well, she is here in person. So, ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together, give her a very warm welcome. In third place, welcome onto stage, Christine Majerus.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. I talked briefly then, you're normally this super domestique within one of the best team in the world, Boels Dolmans, but you've come through and had very much a stunning season for yourself. How do you feel looking back on it now?
Yeah, I feel pretty amazing about my end of the season. I'm used to working for the best riders in the world. I've been riding with world champions the last 4 years, so I'm kind of used to that. And I actually didn't change anything of my riding style this year, but it was just, the good moment and a good day for me. And I was really happy to win our home race, actually, which is really important for Boels. So, yeah, and I'm really proud with that.
So it was 4th at the Women's Tour, the first World Tour win at the Boels Ladies Tour as well, and a career high world ranking of 9th. What pleases you most? Is it that win, especially in the Boels Tour?
Yeah, I mean, everyone is kind of dreaming of winning a world tour. I was too, maybe not that one, but it was kind of surprised in the end, and I'm not saying no to it. Everyone, yeah, it's the biggest line in the CV, and we are not so much riders having won a world tour, so it's really nice.
And this is your first time here at Rouleur Classic as well.
It
what
is.
Do you make of it all?
Like, normally I'm in London just to ride my bike, and I got
not in a dress on stage.
No. Could hang around a little bit in London in the afternoon, and now being here, I mean, it's a nice way to show the brands off, and also a good opportunity for us riders to say thanks to everyone who voted for us, and it's a good end of the season.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Christine, take a seat. We're going to award second and first, and then we'll get stuck into a discussion about women's cycling. So, in second place, I am delighted to announce it was Kirsten Fields. Now, the sprinting sensation is not here with us. She's fortunately for her, unfortunately not here with us, but she is at the Track World Cup competing in Minsk. She was one of Sharon's teammates as well, so she has a very personal message she sent from her phone earlier on. Take a look.
Hi everyone, Kirsten Fields here. I would just like to say to you that I can't be in the theater tonight with Rouleur Classic, since I'm in Minsk, Belarus, for a World Cup track. I would like to thank everyone for voting for me for the Sharon Law's Voxwomen Rider of the Year. I'm really honored to become second in the competition. It's also very nice that we can keep Sharon's name alive with this competition, since she was a former teammate of me and a beautiful person. Have a nice evening.
Well, there we go. Kirsten Fields. And as you can see, we're keeping Sharon's memory alive, and that means so much to the riders, even in the peloton at the moment. Here to collect the award on Kirsten's behalf, she works for Team WNT and Voxwomen, cycling commentator. Please welcome Hannah Walker.
Thank you.
Take a seat, Hannah, and we'll get your thoughts on women's cycling in just a moment. So this is the moment we've been waiting for then, the winner Marianne Vos or Annemiek van Vleuten. Both have had stunning seasons in their own rights, in slightly different ways. One a world champion and one the Women's World Tour winner as well. I can now reveal the winner of the Voxwomen Sharon Law's Road Rider of the Year is, we've got a drum roll over there, I like it, Annemiek van Vleuten. And sadly, Annemiek couldn't be with us either here in person tonight, but she also has sent this message. Take a look.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for voting me to win the Sharon Law's Rider of the Year award. It's a big honor to win it again. This was 2 years ago when I won it, and thank you very much. I had a really great season. I will enjoy the rainbow jersey next year. Sorry I can't attend tonight. I'm on holiday, but I hope you all have a great evening. Thank you.
Well, there we go. I think we can all safely say she's earned that holiday, hasn't she? Here to collect the award on her behalf is a man who has helped shape these awards and really make them happen alongside Voxwomen. So please welcome up onto stage Andy McGrath, Rouleur editor. Thank you. We're now going to get stuck into the nitty-gritty of women's cycling, where it's at, the progress we've had, the changes this season, and what more is to be done as well, the challenges that we face with 2020 and an Olympic year. And to chair that discussion, we have Eurosport's very own cycling podcast, Feminin, Orla Chennaoui.
Thank you, Laura. Congratulations to all the winners. Congratulations, Christine. I want to ask each of you, first of all, to kick this all off, what your highlight has been of 2020. Laura, you've done a great job of running through what a fantastic year of women's racing we've had. So quite a lot of highlights to pick out. Christine, what would you say was your personal highlight of this year?
I have a lot.
Yeah, you have a lot to choose from.
As a domestique, every team victory is actually a personal highlight. I mean, that's what we are working for the whole year, and every team victory feels like my own victory. So up until August, there were a lot, I could tell. But then obviously my end of the season was personally so perfect that my 2 victories in France and also Bulls Ladies Tour was my best memory of the year. Yeah.
It's nice to celebrate.
It was nice to celebrate. Also, we stayed together a little bit after Bulls Ladies Tour because we had a sponsor event. So it was nice to sit down in the evening with the girls and have dinner and just talk it over and say thanks to everyone. And normally we all travel home straight away. And especially at that race, it was nice to have everyone around.
Hannah, what about you? What's been your highlight of the year, do you think, watching?
I think for me, this year's La Course was fantastic in Po. I was there, and it was the first time I'd been to La Course, and I was there and seeing it in the flesh, and it was on the laps, and the crowds were fantastic, and there were so many attacks from the riders, and coming into the closing kilometres, was Amanda Spratt going to be caught? Was the reduced peloton going to catch her? And in the end they did, with 400 metres to go or something, and Vos, like a rocket, off she went. And I think for me it was, that was a huge highlight for me.
And what was that like then, watching it in person for the first time? Because you can watch the racing, we see that from afar, but the atmosphere that La Course has because of the huge crowds of the Tour de France, I mean, it's something really special, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, when I got there in the morning, it's just, hairs are standing up. It was really, really special, and that was the day, obviously, when the men's time trial was on. And I think it was so special to be there and to see how it's grown and gone from the Champs-Élysées to how every year it's been a different kind of race, which I think is nice. But I think it was really special, and to see Vos back the way she is.
We're going to chat about La Course in a bit more detail in a bit, but Andy, I want to ask you what your highlight's been.
Can I be really cheeky?
Yeah, please.
Okay, well...
Not too cheeky. Well, yeah, saw that. Go for it. We're near the end of the day.
Yeah, post-watershed. I'd say it was Chloe Dyger-Owen's astonishing World Championship time trial win in Harrogate. I really felt like a moment watching it, not just for the season, but I thought this American, this young rider, doing one of her first senior European races, she's going to be a star possibly for the next 10 years, maybe more. And this is her kind of putting her flag down. I think it was the biggest world winning margin in history. But it's strange to choose a time trial because they're not the most entertaining things to watch on TV, let's face it. But it was poetry in motion. I kind of had goosebumps watching it.
I wanted to put it into context as well for anyone who follows women's cycling. I think we were all taken aback, not only by her victory, but by the extent of the victory. But put into context what she did. And, you know, she's not used to racing, and okay, it wasn't a road race, but she's not used to racing against Europeans. She doesn't race over here very much. Her age, her injury, everything. What made that victory so remarkable, apart from just the performance itself?
Well, I suppose it was her lack of experience. We knew she was in form. We didn't know whether she could do it on the big stage on the day. And we were really expecting probably Annemiek van Vleuten to win. That's
Not
the other
probably,
thing. Yeah. She was a vast favorite. That's what's really nice when the status quo is getting challenged. That's what I think men's and women's cycling needs a fair bit more of.
Laurie, you threw your hands in the
Yeah,
air
it's
when
taken
Andy said that. That was your favourite, was it?
That was, I think, the most sort of stunning, shocking moment for me. A kind of real, like you said, changing of the guard moment, a real standout performance. I think I was quite privileged to witness it, and I was there in Yorkshire, and I spoke to her when she came up on stage just afterwards, and she was so chilled out. She was like, yeah, I know, it was a good ride, wasn't it? I was like, yeah, it was historic. Yeah, history making. And I mean, that for me was her nature and the way she is, the way she conducts herself. There's almost like an innocence about her still, and like a naivety in a lovely way. And when you speak to her, you get that, but within that is this iron steel of, I'm going to win, but does it in a very sort of a naive kind of, I'm just going to turn up and see what I do and see what comes out, and it's a historic performance. I think it was faultless time trialing, and you could see that from the reaction, not just of women cycling fans and female riders and media following women cycling, but also the men's peloton and the wider media as well, who just went, my God, that was incredible. But as Andy took mine, I will add one more, and that's possibly, I think, it's kind of a very British focus, but Lizzie Deignan winning the women's tour, Over Energy Women's Tour, I think that's so important for her to have come back after having a baby, to win on home soil, to come back, as a mother in the peloton and prove it's possible. There was a lot of symbolism around what she achieved then.
Yeah, I found that really emotional, actually.
Oh God,
that. And
yeah.
when she crossed the line, and I spoke to her just moments afterwards, and she said, I've been trying to put my daughter Orla out of my head all week, and I can finally think about her. And I started bawling. I was like, think about my children too. It's amazing. Christine, I want to ask you about Chloe's result at the Worlds, because all of us watching were taken aback by it. Was it the same shock amongst the peloton, or was it a bit more expected? What was the thinking?
I think for us riders, actually, we were less shocked than everyone else.
Probably, yeah.
Maybe we just know the riders a little bit better than the common people watching on TV. We all knew that she was really strong. She was winning literally everything. The last races she was doing in the United States. I mean, she's the best on the track as well. You should never forget that she's not coming out of nowhere. We know that she's really talented and really powerful and has a huge motor. So, I mean, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Maybe I was a bit. Okay. The difference between the others were that's maybe the most surprising, but not that she won.
Yeah, the margin of victory.
Yeah, the margin was.
I want to talk to you about your team, Boels-Dolmans. The most successful team in women's cycling since the Women's World Tour began, and now in a position of trying to find a new title sponsor. How much can you tell us about that? Do you know what the situation is at the moment? Was that any kind of a surprise to you guys on the team?
I kind of knew already a little bit before the official announcement was made. I'm not sad about it, because I know they gave a lot, Bulls and Dolmans gave a lot to women's cycling. It's, I said that already, I wouldn't be here without them. So I try to see more the positive things out of it. Like without them, women's cycling wouldn't also have maybe developed the way it did. So we should see
Almost certainly not.
Certainly not. It's sad that they stopped, but they have their reason. I think they just reached their goals. I mean, we have been the best team for the last 5 or 4 years. You can't get so much more out of it, actually. They reached their goals, and for me, it's fine they leave. Now I hope the team is not stopping, because we have still a lot of ambitions and talents coming up, and talented staff and riders, and we hope to continue.
And is there a confidence on the team that it will continue, that you will be able to find
I'm pretty confident. I know the management is working pretty hard on it, and they're also pretty confident, so I'm actually not so much stressed about it.
I don't want to make this too much of a question, because I would like to make it as much of a discussion as possible. So I want to throw this out to you guys. How much of a litmus test is the situation with Bull Dolmans, do we think, in terms of where we are with women's cycling at the moment? Because we constantly are told, we know how exciting women's cycling is. We know how attractive it is to fans of the sport. We're always told it's the next frontier, and that men's teams are told, you need to be investing in women's teams to be able to move this sport forward. But the reality is that you've got to ask for an awful lot of investment for what is not a guaranteed return. How much do you think are we at a canary in the coal mine, I guess, situation with Bulls Dolmans and where we go forward with it?
I think this is quite a big test. I think if a team with the success that Bulls Dolmans have had, the riders in that roster, Anna van der Breggen, Chantal Black, Amelia Deirdrichsen, 3 world champions. It's a team that has produced results for Lizzie Armistead, then now Gagne, for Megan Gagne, of course, winner of the first ever Women's World Tour. It has been the there team for the last 4 or 5 years. If they cannot attract a new sponsor, I think there are a lot
something
of questions
wrong
to be
in
asked.
the business model, maybe.
For sure.
Teams disappear all the time, don't they? Certainly in men's cycling.
Yeah.
Teams disappear, and success is no guarantee of further investment.
It's not the teams that disappear, it's the sponsors.
True.
They change. I mean, teams keep on going, but a lot of sponsors are changing constantly. Maybe not 2 at the same time. Maybe one is stepping off, and then the next one is stepping off 3 years later. That's why we don't really notice it. Now you see it because both say, okay, we reached our goals and that's it. But teams actually don't disappear so much. Actually.
Personally, I feel that women's cycling has been in a state of flux and kind of on the cusp of something like this change for almost 10 years. I've always been asking similar questions to riders, what they think would be best to change the sport. And in a way, I think you need to make an audacious leap in the governance like this to hopefully shake it up and to have new sponsors, prospective new sponsors in the future, realizing we need to put in X amount of money. There needs to be a minimum wage. It's 2019, nearly 2020, and the world's changing too. So I'm hopeful that it will drag a lot of existing sponsors, almost all of them, ideally with them, and draw out some new ones. But that's cycling. It's always hard to find sponsors. Even De Koning, the men's most prolific winning team, nearly went under last year, I think.
I think, it's just changing. And I think, how long has Bulls Dolmans been around? Like 8 years, 9 years? I think, what they've given to the sport, not just with the team, but sponsoring the Bulls Ladies Tour, the Ardennes Classics, I think times do change, but, obviously really hope that they will.
I don't know if there's so much other sponsors that have been so long in women's cycling than they do. So we should not point with the fingers on them saying, why are you leaving? We should say, thanks for being there. And
I think they've really paved the way as well. Yeah. I mean, you think how dominant your team as Bulls Dolmans has been, and not just in having the best riders in the world, but also developing riders. I mean, Amelie went there after she won the Junior Worlds, and 1 or 2 years later, senior world champion. So I think, Danny and the team have done a really great job.
Yeah, and I think that's very true, and it's very important that we remember that it's a cause for celebration, that they've been in the sport for so long, rather than saying, why are they leaving? Because as you say, sponsors do leave hugely successful teams all the time. Does it matter, do you think, to the profile and to the look of women's cycling, Christine, whether we have now, if we have someone coming in to replace that budget, whether it is a brand new sponsor to women's cycling or someone specific to women's cycling rather, or whether it is a male team that is keen to add a female division? Because we're seeing this, obviously, evolution in the sport. Do you think it matters to the DNA of women's cycling, whether it's a male sponsor or a specifically female sponsor?
I think we should not close doors. I think what makes women's cycling interesting is that it has a lot of input from a little bit of everywhere, and only being in our own bubble wasn't good, but also having only the bubble of men's cycling won't be good. So it's good to have the mixture of both. So I don't think, like, we showed that it's possible to be the best team with not being dependent on a man team. We showed it's possible. The other way around, it's possible as well. But I think it was obviously more and more men team might be interested in becoming also a women team, but the other way around will also still exist, I think.
Andy, you're in the position of selling magazines, of selling news, of selling the sport. Does it help when it is a Trek Segafredo, for example, a Mitchelton Scott? Does that make it an easier sell in terms of women's cycling?
I think to the casual fan, they might be more aware. It's just tricky though, because we know that fundamentally teams like Ineos and De Koning could have a women's team if they wanted to. The money is clearly there. But on the other hand, if it's going to be tokenist, should they be having one? If it's just going to be an empty gesture?
Yeah, I agree. I think if they're not wanting to do it and it's not something that they have their goals and sights set on, then I don't think you should just do it for the sake of it because everyone thinks they should do it. I think it should be there from the passion.
I think it's also like a good thing from women's cycling. It's really a passion thing, actually, more than at least it's still more a passion thing than men's cycling. Men's cycling, it's also business, and women's cycling is still a little bit less of a business. And it's not just here's your budget and do whatever you want. We, at least as a rider, at least at Boots Dortmund, we have that. It's like, yeah, I really like the team because it's like a family. And just giving the money and saying, okay, just do like you did before, but without the passion, like I wouldn't like it at least. And I think that's a big difference still with men's cycling. Maybe we are going there, but we still have a little bit more of that passion thing.
Is there an inevitability to this though, Laura? Are we looking at, we're on this path now whereby more and more men's teams are adding female squads on the side. Are we going to get to the stage where, for example, it just looks archaic for Ineos or De Koning to not have a women's team, and whether it's tokenistic or not, it's just the business model. It's what they've got to do to be able to sell their brand.
Yeah, I think we could get to that point, certainly, but I completely agree with Hannah and with what Christine said, that actually Boels Dortmund's proved they can do it alone as a standalone female women's team. And women's cycling is not a charity case, nor is it a token gesture. And equality should never be a token gesture. It should be the right of every human being on this planet, whether you're a female cyclist or a male, or whatever And so I think if teams want a women's team and are willing to invest and fully support and have that women's team on an equal platform with entire parity between the two, then brilliant. That's only going to strengthen the sport, I think, because they do have a greater access to resources, to money, to staff. I mean, I spoke to Lizzie Deignan yesterday about her first season with Trek, and she said, Trek Segafredo, and she said that it's been amazing, and she said it's just total parity, and she seems the happiest she's ever been, the most relaxed she's ever been. She seems entirely content with where she is, and she said she's with a team that respects her as a bike rider and respects her as a woman, and that for me was quite a powerful statement. So maybe a bit of both. We have standalone women's teams like Boels Dortmund who have proven they can do it. But the business model, a sustainable business model, potentially is linking into the men's teams.
So what do we think then of the two-tier system that we're going to see introduced next year, Christine? Boels Dortmund didn't apply for the top racing licence. What kind of a difference will it make in the first year? Any difference, do you think? How are we seeing this evolving?
Yeah, you always have a trial year, and then you see. I mean, if we don't try it, then we're not gonna see how it's working out. I mean, there was so much pressure with minimum salary from the UCI. I think they also couldn't say no anymore, which was good because that was our public voice, and we made it here. And it's great to see that finally it's gonna happen. Now we just need to wait and see how long it's going to take that it's more than just 7 teams having it. I mean, we didn't apply because the sponsors didn't keep on going, because otherwise I think we would also have been in. But it's nice to see them. I think the biggest advantage, and my microphone is gone.
There, I think we're back again.
Is that, I mean, the girls just can become more professional and don't have to work beside, because majority of the women peloton, they are still working beside, and you cannot improve. You don't have so much recovery. Your travel is getting complicated. You cannot have 60 days of racing per year if you're not professional 100%. And I think that's going to improve the level of most of the riders, and then we're just getting a field that's way more competitive, and racing is getting better. That's at least my...
Yeah. I think if you look at who's applied, it's every team that has a men's team alongside it. So Movistar, Francis Dujou, Trek Segafredo. So
they can afford it.
Yeah, I think so. And I think they need to. I think if there would be a little bit of a... Why haven't you? If you've got a men's team in the World Tour, why haven't you got a women's team? But
sure.
I think, from the money side of things, they can definitely afford it. But I think, will it affect how many riders are on a team? Because at the minute, you have a maximum of 16. Will they, cut down a little bit to maybe 10 or 11 riders due to the costing? We'll see. But I think, like you say, with a trial year, see how it goes. And I think, maybe more teams will actually think, that's for us, and let's try and get another sponsor on board, or a couple of sponsors on board, and we want to be in that World Tour.
The UCI had to do something. They had to show that they were committing to women's cycling in some way and to advancing it in some way. Those announcements that they've made, the changes that they're making, are they where their priorities should be?
I think for riders, a minimum salary would be, and working conditions, team contracts, minimum salary, they would be where the priorities are. I think a point to raise is something that Ashley Moolman-Passio said about the reforms when they were announced, and that was that this is not sustainable, and teams will fold because they cannot afford to pay riders a minimum salary. And she said the point that we do not have the media coverage to attract the necessary sponsors for the necessary money to go into these reforms. And that actually is crucial. So while we're going on a sort of, right, this is where we're going, this is the path we're going on, we're going to have minimum salary, we're going to have 2-tier system, here we go. Is there enough here to actually bolster that and to act as the foundation? And that being return of investment for sponsorship, that being media coverage, that being every single World Tour race live, which at the moment it's not. And the ASO races, on a parity with the men's and women's races, they are 2 huge culprits, criminals of that, which are not put live. And I question whether it's through choice, not a case of can't.
Well, this is a huge bugbear of mine, Andy, when it comes to women's racing, and I really think that the one way that it can evolve the quickest and in the most fundamental and deep level is with more coverage, because we need to be able to watch this racing. We need to know that it is fantastic racing. We do not know how exciting it can be unless we can see it. Is that also fundamental, I guess, to the magazine coverage? Because that we are so far from, and the 2 sports are so vastly different anyway at this stage, but we're so far from anywhere near parity between coverage in the 2 sports. Does the television coverage have to come first?
I think it has to go hand in hand. It's not a bad thing to have more coverage in Rouleur magazine or in other print titles, and on TV, and podcasting and radio. There's no excuse for it, really. I mean, frankly, I think the printed media can do better. We can do better. We will do better in 2020 and beyond. And I'm not just saying it because I'm on a women's panel, but genuinely...
pressure.
Yeah. But do you feel a demand, an audience, a readership demand for that?
I think so.
Or why do you want to do that? Is it the right thing to do? Is it the commercially viable thing to do? Is it just what you've got to do because it's coming up to 2020?
It is the right thing, but that's not the reason we're doing it. It's, personally speaking, I find interviewing female cyclists, they are more engaging, they have more emotional depth, generally, than the male cyclists. They have more interesting life stories, they have normally more life experience.
Partly because they haven't had a minimum wage and they've got to work and study on the side, ironically.
And they have less media and PR training, so they speak their mind, which is great as well. But that's all fantastic things. I think you just have to get these stories out there. Like, for example, in a Rouleur next year, there's going to be the story of a Trinidadian rider called Tenniel Campbell, who's been at the UCI World Cycling Centre for the last 2 years. She's transferring to Valsfar, the Italian squad. She won several races in the summer. She's going to be their first Olympic female athlete in Tokyo next year. She wants to be the greatest. She's a black athlete. She could change cycling. She could be a Serena Williams figure. She looks up to Serena. It's that kind of story that you can tell. Excites me. It's something different. Yeah. And that's what we should be doing more. But I think, going back to Laura's point, it's criminal that ASO, the Tour de France, organises the biggest race in the world and not showing their one-day races on TV. It's so basic that that's really important for the future.
There has to be more demand for that, doesn't there? There has to be a greater groundswell of demand, not just asking for it, but demanding that we get these races, surely.
I don't know what the answer is to say. I don't know how ASO will ever think we should now do this. I genuinely don't know how we get through to them, because I think that demand is there. And not just demand on social media and then through us talking about it in panels like this, but demand through viewing stats, which show that the viewing figures, when we have the opportunity to watch women's cycling and women's sport, people watch. You know, and I go back to 2016, and the women's road race was one of the most watched events on there. You know, the story about Annemiek van Vleuten afterwards was the most read on their website. Laura Kenny drew in 11 million hits on that Tuesday night. When she, you know, the women's hockey drew in millions of hits. It moved the 10 o'clock news. And I say this time and time again, that when we have the opportunity to watch women's sport and women's cycling, we will watch it. But we're not being given the opportunity regularly and consistently enough for it to become a viewing habit. You can't just switch on Eurosport and find it. You've got to get 6 viruses on your MacBook in some dark corner of the internet on some dodgy live stream.
I think it's even not just watching it on TV. I think it's, you know, engaging on social media in the women's races, or, you know, if you can't watch it, it's, you know, buying the magazines, buying the publications. So it's for everyone. I think it's a big circle, isn't it? It's kind of, if the viewing stats aren't there, then they think, well, it's not worth putting on, and so it's everyone does a little bit of a job to help, and I think that, you know, it
I
gets
think
better.
the media just really needs to realize, or the journalists, that you have a huge responsibility in this. We cannot write the articles, we cannot film ourselves, we have our social media, but I think our social media is already so reached the level that we cannot build it even further. I think our social media is way better than some of the men's team, because that's our own, like, the only opportunity to show how it's gonna work, like our life actually. And media just needs to step a little bit more into that. And we cannot force anyone, but you can kind of force people to watch us if you show them. If I'm, my own experience, if I'm watching sport on TV, I'm a sport passionate. I actually don't really care what I'm watching as long as it's sports. And if it is women or men, I don't care. As long as it's a nice sport to watch, I do watch it. I don't question it. Why do they show women, or why do they show men? And I think that's the responsibility of the media, and we cannot push more than we do, actually.
And I think that's quite representative of all sports fans. And it's funny, every year when we get to La Course, my my thing every year is that if every journalist who was wringing their hands in the media and in the print saying about there not being a women's Tour de France, if every one of those would write one article a year on a women's race, the coverage would increase exponentially. But La Course then, we're talking about ASO, we're talking about coverage. This year, or next year rather, we're going from the mountain stages that we've seen the last couple of years back to a crit, essentially, in Paris. Now, that's come under criticism, Christine, from a number of riders, mostly climbers, it has to be said. But there's been a bit of a clamour with La Course the last couple of years to make it bigger, to add a few stages. We had it a few years ago, an experiment at least, which maybe worked, maybe didn't. What do you think of going back to a criterium in Paris?
It's not a criterium, it's a real race and it's a really hard race. The problem is not that it's going back to Paris. I think actually riding in Paris, it's a really nice location, and it's maybe the one where we get also a lot of viewers and on the road, like spectators on the road. So it's not the problem of where it is. I enjoyed racing up the Izoard. I enjoyed watching the race in Pau, and I will also enjoy racing in Paris. So that's not the problem at all. The problem is that it's just not getting bigger. Like it doesn't. Like I'm not saying that I want to race 3 weeks. I'm pretty sure I couldn't. I know my limits, and like the 11 days we have in Giro, I think that's like the perfect longest stage we can have.
And you're happy for there not to be a women's Tour de France?
No, I'm not. Call it whatever you want. I'm not saying I want the 3 weeks. I just want it to be like bigger every year. Like add a stage here, make it for everyone, make it a TT, make it a real stage race, like Tour of Britain. Or I mean, we have so many nice races going on, and also media is following on those races. So why can't they do it? And it's making me also a little bit angry that we are talking actually so much about them. We're giving them publicity and they actually are doing nothing, expecting one race, like in the Tour de France. Why don't we talk more about the races that are actually existing? And there are a lot of them. And that's making me a little bit angry, so that's all I'm going to say about it.
I completely agree with you, and I've done what I accuse the media of doing every year at La Course, because I completely agree, and I've said for a long time, if ASO were not interested in delivering a bigger race, why do we give them that publicity? But it is what the wider world understand. It is what those beyond cycling can latch onto. A women's Tour de France is an easy headline. Do we need that? And Andy, to play devil's advocate, can we support it? And I don't just mean in terms of logistics. I don't just mean in terms of the policing, etc. But if you look at, for example, La Course this year, and I was there for Eurosport at the very start of the day, and I was there to the very end of the day. Very few journalists were doing that, and that's for one day. Can we give a platform to a longer, more extensive La Course or version of La Course at the same time as a Tour de France? Because I'm not entirely sure that it's feasible from a journalistic point of view as well as from a rider point of view.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realise the demands on the journalists on the day.
We're not saying woe was us, by the way.
No, yeah, exactly. But that's a problem too. And it sounds like we're complaining when I even say that, but it can be tricky to cover both. Just before I go back to that, there's another race in cycling that captures a collective imagination that we don't have in the women's sport. That's Paris-Roubaix. Like, that is very evocative. I think pretty much everyone here watches it, switches on their TV on a Sunday around Easter and watches it. There's no reason why there isn't one. There's no real reason. Like, I've had reasons given to me by Thierry Gouvenou that, in my opinion, are a bit soft, frankly. That would be incredible, wouldn't it? That would be something that would get media attention, undoubtedly. So, going back to your point, I think we could have a longer La Course. I think it would be nice to see 3-4 days. It would be a risk to go from 1 to 5-6 days. So maybe build it slowly. But it's kind of like, unless you build it, who's going to come? That's the difficulty, though, isn't it?
Do we need to get over it, though, as Christine says, essentially? Do we just need to, whatever it is, but we've got a fantastic calendar. Let's celebrate and talk about that. And if that's the case, how do we do it? How do we get the wider world latching on to the fact that it's bloody exciting?
There's so many other races as well. You know, Makameen Bera in the Basque Country, you know, fantastic race. Turingen Rundfahrt is 7 days long. But I think, you know, as Christine said, at the Giro, you know, 10, 11 days is quite enough, I think. It's like, not just for riders, but I think for teams and staff as well. I mean, I was on the Giro for the first time this year, and it is hard. You know, the women's teams just don't really have the staff that the men's do. I think on that race was the first time we had 4 soigneurs. We had 2 mechanics. We had, you know, a driver. I think it was just, it completely changes things. And I think if you're going to do 3 weeks, the women's teams need to be bigger as well then. And the whole thing just needs to be bigger and bigger. And I think it is going in that way.
That's the problem with the calendar. I mean, we can add races and races and races, but as long as the teams do not become bigger and more like professional with more stuff, it's impossible for all the teams to race all those races. I mean, where do the riders come from? So, I mean, it needs to go together as long, and the team needs to grow, and then we can also grow the calendar.
Laura, final thought from you?
Well, I agree with you, and I think you wrote a column about this. Do we need a women's Tour de France? And I actually am at a point where I just think, while, yes, the Tour de France captures the wider sporting imagination, I firmly believe we need to celebrate the races that truly value and celebrate female bike riders, instead of piggybacking on this dream of that the Tour de France will eventually take women seriously. For me, races like, the Women's Tour de Yorkshire do a great job, Over Energy Women's Tour. Trofeo Binda is a long-standing women's race, and it is so exciting. That was one of my favourite races this year, actually, with Marianne Vos winning. That was absolutely brilliant. And I'm at a point where I think we do actually need to see women's cycling as its own product, with its own value and its own identity, its own DNA, rather than a sort of copycat younger sister of the men's arm of the sport.
I think if we look at Drenthe as well, early in the season,
exactly, it's
a very exciting race. I don't know, you think it's crosswinds and it's, you know, it's just explosive. Brilliant race, and it has a men's race, but actually the women's race is bigger than the men's. Yeah. So I don't necessarily think it always has to be alongside.
Amen to that. Let's get watching, let's get talking, let's get shouting about women's racing in 2020. Thank you very much indeed, Christine, Hannah, Andy, and Laura.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So we've got one last treat for you here this evening. I see a few smiles at the prospect of what's to come. We have got the most infamous, I think, team manager in virtual professional cycling. He's had a tough old year, has this guy, and he'll be on stage telling us just about it in just a moment. Kenny van Vlammenk.